Welcome back to another episode of Crime Scene X. Today's episode is about 3 true camping horror stories. Sit back and enjoy the video. We were just a group of friends out for a weekend adventure. 5 of us in total. Kevin, Emma, Josh, Lily, and myself, all eager to escape the city's chaos and reconnect with nature. We chose a site deep within the forest, known only to a few local campers. The location was idyllic, next to a bubbling stream, surrounded by towering pines. We set up camp, laughing and joking, blissfully unaware of what awaited us. On the first night, we gathered around the fire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. Everything was normal until Kevin, the most observant among us, noticed something peculiar, a faint glow through the trees. We brushed it off as another campsite or a distant cabin. The second day was filled with hiking and exploring. It was during one of our treks that we found an abandoned campsite. The fire pit was cold, the tent torn, belongings scattered. We felt a twinge of unease, but reasoned it had been left by careless campers. That night, our jovial mood dampened, and we retired to our tents early. We were awakened in the dead of night by a chilling scream. It was Emma. She claimed she'd seen a man's face peering into her tent, his eyes wild and his smile twisted. We searched the area but found nothing. Josh and Kevin wanted to leave, but Lily and I argued that it was probably a curious animal or a figment of Emma's imagination. We were wrong. The third night, the terror became real. We were ripped from sleep by a gruff voice ordering us to be silent. A man stood over us, his face hidden by a hood, a large hunting knife glinting in his hand. He tied us up one by one, his movements methodical, his breathing ragged. He said nothing, only grunting when we tried to plead with him. We were helpless, our eyes wide with terror, as he bound our hands and feet with rough ropes. Once we were secured, he rummaged through our belongings, taking food and water, his back to us. His focus on his task gave us a moment, a precious sliver of time. Kevin, ever resourceful, had managed to slip a small knife from his pocket. He cut his ropes and then freed Josh. As the man turned back to us, Josh lunged at him, wrestling for control of the knife. We held our breath, knowing this was our only chance. With a guttural cry, Kevin joined the struggle, and together they managed to subdue the man, knocking him unconscious. We cut ourselves free and grabbed what we could, leaving the man tied and gagged in our place. We ran through the dark woods, guided by the adrenaline and terror, not stopping until we reached the safety of our car. The police found the man, still bound where we left him. He was a local, known to be unstable but never violent. They found evidence of other attacks in his home, other groups of campers who hadn't been as fortunate as us. Our trip ended in a nightmare, a chilling encounter that none of us will ever forget. The forest, once a place of beauty and peace, has become tainted, marred by the realization that pure evil can lurk behind the facade of nature's calm. We were lucky to escape, but the memories, the what-ifs, and that man's cold, unfeeling eyes will stay with us forever. A dark shadow over a trip that was meant to be a joyful escape. Camping had always been my escape, my way to reconnect with nature and myself. But my last trip changed everything, leaving me with a terror that still clings to me like a shadow. I had planned a week-long solo camping trip in a remote part of the forest, a place untouched by tourism and known only to a few seasoned locals. I had heard stories about the area being unspoiled and serene, and that's exactly what I sought. The first day was everything I'd hoped for. I set up camp beside a peaceful lake, surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to whisper stories of the ages. I spent the day exploring, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the stress of everyday life slip away. By the time the sun began to set, I had built a fire and cooked dinner, and the soft sounds of the wilderness lulled me into a sense of security. Wrapped in a blanket, I stared into the fire, lost in thought. That night, the sound of something scraping against fabric pulled me from sleep. It was faint, and I dismissed it as an animal exploring my campsite. I settled back into my sleeping bag, a nagging unease in the back of my mind. The next morning, I discovered footprints around my tent, human footprints. My heart caught in my throat. I examined them, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. They were too large to belong to an animal, and there was a purposeful pattern to them, as though someone had circled my tent. The day passed in a blur of anxiety. I tried to enjoy hiking and fishing, but the sense of being watched was a constant presence. Every rustle in the leaves, every snap of a twig set me on edge. I considered leaving but convinced myself I was overreacting. After all, I was in a public forest. It wasn't unreasonable to think another hiker had wandered through. That night, as I sat by the fire, the feeling of dread intensified. The forest had changed, the shadows longer, the sounds distorted. I kept looking into the darkness, expecting to see something or someone, but there was only silence. Retiring to my tent, I lay awake, listening to the night. Hours passed, the minutes stretching into an eternity. Then it came again, that scraping sound. This time I knew it was no animal. I snapped on my flashlight, heart pounding, and grabbed a small knife I'd brought for cutting food. I unzipped the tent and saw a figure running into the woods, a blade glinting in his hand. My tent had been slashed, a long, deliberate cut, right where my head had been. I didn't think, I just ran. Stumbling through the darkness, branches clawing at my face, I ran until I reached my car. I drove away, shaking, glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see the man following me. The following day, I reported the incident to the local authorities. They were skeptical but agreed to investigate. They found my slashed tent, the footprints, but no sign of the man. Weeks turned into months, and the terror began to fade, replaced by questions. Who was he? Why was he there? Was he watching me? Or was I just in the wrong place at the wrong time? But there was one question that haunted me above all others. What if I hadn't woken up? I've never gone camping alone again. The wilderness, once my sanctuary, has become a place of fear, its beauty overshadowed by the knowledge that it can also hide something sinister. Ever since childhood, my friends and I shared a love for camping. The wild, the unpredictable, the freedom of nature. It all drew us in like a magnet. As adults, we tried to keep the tradition alive, going on annual trips to various secluded spots. This year, we chose an isolated region in the mountains, miles away from any trace of civilization. Our group, consisting of myself, Tom, Sarah, and Mike, arrived on a beautiful and crisp Friday morning. The campsite was surrounded by towering trees, their leaves rustling in a soft breeze, and a crystal-clear river running nearby. It was perfect. The first day was everything we'd hoped for. We set up our tents, gathered firewood, and embarked on an adventurous hike along a rugged trail. As we walked, we joked and reminisced about old times, feeling a connection to each other and nature. Everything was perfect, or so it seemed. That first night, as we sat around the campfire, Sarah mentioned that she'd felt like someone was watching us on the trail. We all laughed it off, teasing her for being paranoid. We stayed up late, enjoying the night, but as I finally tucked into my sleeping bag, a sense of unease settled over me. I told myself it was nothing. The next day our mood was still light, though the memory of Sarah's words lingered in the back of my mind. We fished, swam in the river, and explored some more. Yet there were moments when I felt a presence, a gaze upon me from somewhere in the forest. I said nothing, not wanting to add to any irrational fear. When we returned to camp, we found our food supplies scattered. Claw marks on the containers and prints on the ground indicated an animal, likely a raccoon or a bear. But something felt wrong. The way our belongings had been rummaged through seemed too deliberate, too human. That night, the laughter was forced, the conversation stilted. The sense of being watched had grown, and we all felt it, though no one dared speak it out loud. Sleep was elusive, and I found myself listening for sounds, straining my ears against the silence of the night. Then it happened. Footsteps. Quiet at first, then growing louder. I peeked out of my tent and saw a faint glow in the distance, a lantern swaying back and forth, and a dark silhouette of a man. Panic set in, and I woke the others. We searched the area, our flashlights cutting through the darkness, but found nothing. The others were skeptical, thinking my mind was playing tricks. We went back to sleep, but the image of the lantern and the man stayed with me, my heart pounding in my chest. The next day was our last, and it was filled with unspoken tension. We stuck close together, each of us casting nervous glances into the shadows of the trees. That night, I heard the footsteps again, closer this time, unmistakable. I looked out and saw the lantern and the man again, standing at the edge of our campsite, watching. My screams woke the others. But once again, the man vanished. My friends were angry now, thinking I was playing a prank. I knew what I saw, but doubt began to creep in. We decided to pack up and leave at dawn. As we broke down our camp, Tom found a note pinned to a tree with a rusted old nail. It was ragged and worn, the handwriting scrawled and almost illegible. "Leave. You don't belong here." We left in a hurry, not speaking, each of us lost in our thoughts. The image of that man, that lantern, the note, all of it haunts me still. Who was he? What did he want? Was he real, or just a manifestation of our collective fears? Thanks for watching.